Good evening. Well, we had our pleasure this afternoon. Let's go to work tonight. In living the infinite way, in living spiritually, we naturally have one goal. That is the attainment of conscious union with our source, God. That is the goal of all mystical religion. The fruitage of conscious union with God is spiritual harmony. Very often, truth students of all schools forget that the fruitage we are seeking is spiritual fruitage, and they think of their demonstrations in a material way or material form. That is, they think that the purpose of God is to give us money or marriage or a home. They think of their demonstration as being something in the material realm, very much in the nature of having more matter or better matter. Whereas that never was a part of spiritual living or spiritual demonstration. The Master, rebuking this very thought, said that my kingdom is not of this world. And yet we very often turn to the Christ kingdom as if we wanted it to double the amount of matter or give us better matter than we already have. The student makes the greatest progress once they have come to the realization that the kingdom of God is a spiritual kingdom and its fruitage is spiritual fruitage. When we realize God as spirit and seek the things of the Spirit, a very strange thing does happen. That abundance of the Spirit comes to us in forms that we call our human good. In other words, the Master says, I am come that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly. Now, as long as we're not thinking of dollars or properties or human affairs, and we are thinking of turning to the Christ for that life, and that life more abundantly, it comes to us, and strangely enough, it does come as dollars or homes or happy relationships. But the point is that if we are not outlining, our good may not always come in the form that we expect it. Actually, I have witnessed in my work many people who have turned to the Spirit for spiritual realization, for spiritual good, and then found themselves possessed of talents that they never had before. Some have composed music and been successful with it. Others have become writers. Others have gone from the work in which they are engaged to other activities. In other words, the activity of the Spirit doesn't always increase what we think is our good, but appears to us in other forms of good than we originally believed in. But above all things, we must remember that the Christ kingdom is not of this world, and therefore we are not to think of spiritual demonstration in material forms. Now, this afternoon, I brought out this fact that in prayer, we in our work are taught never to pray for things. Well, if we're never to pray for things, what is left to pray for? Well, we can ask for divine grace. We can seek spiritual illumination. We can knock at the door of consciousness for greater unfoldment. We can certainly ask for that life which is to be more abundantly experienced. Always we can pray, "Thy grace is my sufficiency." We can always keep our prayers in the realm of the spiritual without ever once coming down to the level of saying, "Heal my heart," or "increase my income," or "secure a position for me," for these things are not of the kingdom of God. I remember one time a man coming to me in great distress and saying, "I need employment and I need work and I need it right away. I need it badly." I said, "You mean you love work that much?" "Well, no, but I must have income." "Well, a moment ago you needed work. Now we've gone on and find it isn't work you're so anxious about, it's income. But is that what you really need? Would an inheritance do just as well?" "Oh, yes, it would." "Well, now it isn't an income, now it's an inheritance." "Well, now, couldn't we get along without an inheritance if you put your hand in your pocket every day and found the sum of money you needed?" "Oh, that would do too." "Well, now we've come a long, long way from where you came in here looking for work." And so you see, actually, he was telling an untruth when he said he wanted work. Probably that's the last thing in the world he wanted. Unless there was no other way of getting those dollars. And so with all of us, don't you really believe that if we analyzed our prayers, we would find that we really do not want the thing we're praying for, but some equivalent of it? And of course we would get the exact thing that is meant for us if we learn to pray spiritually. Now this I learned. God is infinite. Actually, nothing exists but God. Therefore, if I have God, I have all. I have every form that can appear, every form of good. So that my best prayer always would be, "Father, reveal thyself." Or, "Let me ask for illumination, for where there is light, there is no darkness. Let me seek for greater consciousness of truth, for where there is truth, there is no error." And so, the greatest attainment that any of us can have is God awareness. For God is the substance of which all spiritual form is composed. So what really would be the use of having anything in the world if we didn't have God? You who have lived through this generation already know that praying for money is useless, because if you had all of it there is in the world, you haven't any knowledge at this moment when it will become devalued and outmoded. You don't know if you could pray and have all the property in the world, what moment the government would relieve you of its responsibility. You don't know if you had every bit of health that you can dream of, that an accident couldn't take it away from you the next moment. So what's the use of praying for any of these things if after you've got them they can't give you satisfaction? This one prays for marriage, and you know what they sometimes get. And this one prays for money and gets indigestion. This we all know if we are truthful. There is no use in having anything in this world unless we have a bit of God along with it. So let us, at least, in the spiritual movements of the world, let us give up this unholy desire to demonstrate things, conditions, places, and persons, and seek just that which the Master told us to seek, the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Let all of these things be added unto us. I'm sure you know that Eddie Rickenbacker is a millionaire, and that he was out in the Pacific Ocean with 6 of his friends, where his checkbook was of absolutely no value, and where they evidently forgot to put supermarkets. And there he was with millions in the bank and millions of property, and even owning dozens of great big airplanes. And here he was limited to a little rubber boat out in the middle of the Pacific. That's a sad position to be in, except for one thing, that he had already learned that not one thing that he possessed was of real value in comparison to one thing he had learned. He had learned the omnipresence of God. He had learned that he could sit even out in a rubber boat in the middle of the Pacific and just fold his arms and wait. And rain would fall from the sky, and birds would come down and sit on his head and give themselves up, and fish would jump up out of the sea into the boat, and all of that happened, and he was fed for all of those weeks that he was lost in the Pacific. And he didn't have to use one check in his checkbook. You see, having God, we have literally all. As Moses demonstrated, we have manna in the wilderness. We have water in the wilderness. As Elijah demonstrated for the widow. Here she was, a poor widow, so poor that her son was to be sold into slavery just to pay her debts. It wasn't necessary. She asked the Hebrew prophet to pray for her. And out of that little cruse of oil came enough to pay all of her debts and save her son. Out of a cruse of oil which she already had. Now, the question that prophet asked of the widow was this: what have you in the house? That is the same question that Jesus asked of the disciples when they told about the multitudes that were there to be fed. What have we? We had a few loaves and fishes. Scripture says this: to him that hath shall be given. From him that hath not shall be taken away even the little that he hath. And that's a hard saying. Just think of it. The practical application of that in your life and in mine is this, that we dare never affirm that we have not. We dare never affirm that we need or we want. For sure as fate, we will demonstrate need and want. For if we have need and want in our house, need and want we will have abundantly, pressed down and running over. It is what you have in your house that you demonstrate. And if you say, I have nothing, or if you say, I have lack, or if you say, I have little, that is what you must demonstrate, because you are putting the value on what you have. On the contrary, if you affirm, I have some oil, I have some loaves and fishes, I have the presence of God, I have the Spirit of the Christ, I have divine love fulfilling itself in me, I and my Father are one, and all that the Father hath is mine. We have a principle of supply now that will never fail us. But to try to demonstrate supply is to start from the premise that I haven't it, and now I'm going to not have it 10 times over. Be careful in your practice of your spiritual truths, because you are dealing with laws. And the law of lack is more lack, and the law of desire is more desire. The law of wanting is more wanting. There is only one true law, and that law is or have or am. I have meat the world knows not of. I am the bread of life. I am the water. I am the wine. Or I have, I include, I embody, I embrace within myself the kingdom of God. Now I am living in my divine relationship as Son of God, whether I'm out in the Pacific with nothing, or out in the Atlantic, or upstairs or downstairs, wherever I may be, I am now declaring that the place whereon I stand is holy ground. All that the Father hath is mine, and then that is what I demonstrate. In other words, nothing really can be added to you. At this very moment, God has fulfilled itself as your individual life. God has given you his life, therefore your life is infinite. God has given you his wisdom, therefore your wisdom is infinite. God has given you his inheritance, his abundance, therefore yours is abundance. And you're living in that truth, and letting that truth live in you demonstrates itself as fulfillment in your experience. So it is with healing. Now, all of us here are interested in the subject of spiritual healing. If we understand even a little bit of this principle, we already know that healing work is not really the activity of God. In other words, God never really heals anyone. That would be sort of a sinful affair, because it would be acknowledging that someone was lacking something and God knew about it and now was going to correct it. And that couldn't be. It isn't really that God heals, although we use that language. The real truth of the matter is this: that a long way back in human history, an event took place which changed the history of the world. At one time, all of us were pure spiritual beings. We lived and moved and had our being in God. There was neither lack nor limitation. There was no sin and there was no disease. That experience was called our Edenic state. That was our time of living in the Garden of Eden. And into that consciousness nothing entered that defileth or maketh a lie. We were pure, perfect beings. There were no truth movements because none were needed. There was no one sick and no one poor and no one sinful. There were no religions and there were no churches. None were needed. Or any police departments. None were needed. We were pure, perfect beings. And now something stole into that Garden of Eden, and you have never been told the truth about it until here very, very recently. And so you haven't actually known what happened that threw us out of the Garden of Eden. The churches made up some fairy stories to please their simple children, but they did not tell them the truth. Probably they didn't know it. I wouldn't know that. But I do know this, they never told them the truth. The truth is this, that in some way that we at present can't account for, there came into our consciousness a belief in two powers, the power of good and the power of evil. Don't ask me how it could happen if we had the mind of God, because I don't know. I don't know how it could happen that we who had that perfect mind of God could accept a belief in two powers, but we did. We called this good and we called that evil. Adam, you remember, was rebuked for that very thing. He hid himself from God, and God wanted to know why, and Adam told him he was naked, and God said, "Who told you you were naked? Where did you get this information?" In other words, what is so wrong, what is so evil about being naked? But Adam had already come into an awareness that there was good and there was evil, and he was deciding which was which. And of course he decided that being naked was evil. It wasn't. And many of our races of people on this earth have lived naked, and no harm has come of it. But in their simple and pure minds, there was nothing evil about being naked. Now, so it is that this belief, this knowledge of good and evil came into our consciousness, and that threw us out of the Garden of Eden. And ever since then, we have had a strange thing. There has been a God and a devil. That's strange, because in the beginning, you know, God was infinite. And God was good, therefore God was infinite good. Now, where could a devil come from? And so, it wasn't known, but it is now, that a devil was just man's imagination, man's own creation, which he thought up and then began to fear. So we had a devil and we had Satan, all images in man's mind, self-created, self-worshipped, self-feared. Well, philosophers came along who were far too smart to be caught on religious matters, and they decided that religion was just for the women. And they were going to think up something far better than religion, so they thought up philosophy. But don't think they didn't fall into the same trap. Only they couldn't call it God and devil because they didn't believe in God. They called it good and evil. Capital G for good and capital E for evil. But they perpetuated the God and devil. Now, when metaphysics came into being, Mrs. Eddy, in her earliest teachings, said that there was only one mind, the immortal mind. But she summed up all of the error in the world under the heading of mortal mind and said that it was a term denoting nothingness. And so at first her students did beautiful healing work, because whenever anyone came to them with a problem, it made no difference if it was physical, mental, moral, or financial, these early practitioners merely said mortal mind, nothingness. Wiped it off like that. There was only one power, and they had wonderful healings. But of course it was only a few years until mortal mind began to be the opposite of divine mind, and that made it a synonym for evil. And now we're back again to two powers. Now we have immortal mind and mortal mind, and we have mortal mind making disease and immortal mind curing disease. Isn't that nonsense? But that's what happened in the metaphysical world, and all of the movements have perpetuated that. The belief that there is an immortal mind which is good and a mortal mind which is bad, or a carnal mind which is bad, or hypnotism which is bad, or some other term that is synonymous with evil. And so here we are in this 20th century in metaphysics, and we again have two powers: God the good and error the evil. Immortal mind the good and mortal mind the evil, or any other name that you want to give to it. And you know what it does to all of us? It puts us right back outside the Garden of Eden again. And it takes from us the one and only healing principle that ever has worked or ever will work. And that is the principle that there is only one power, and you can take all the rest of the sins, diseases, deaths, lacks, and limitations in the world and just say poof. And you really then witness healing, like the Master going up to a blind man and putting spittle on his eye. Can you imagine spittle healing blindness? Well, what was the Master doing? Putting power in spittle? No. Spittle was the Hebraic way of showing disgust or nothingness. And so he was saying, look here, a little spittle will take care of that blindness for you. What did he say to the paralyzed man, the crippled man? What did hinder you? He didn't say a word about God healing him. He didn't say one single word about Christ in you was going to heal you. He just said, what did hinder you? Meaning, what power is there to stop you from getting up? The answer is none. Well, get up. And he did. And what did the Master say to Pilate? Pilate says, I have power to crucify you or set you free. Jesus says, thou couldst have no power over me unless it came from God. And then he let him crucify him to prove that he could crucify him, but he couldn't do what he thought he could. He couldn't kill him. So it is. The secret of spiritual healing is not truth over error. The secret of spiritual healing is not God over disease or good over evil. The truth of spiritual healing is, I, the Lord, am the only power, and beside me there is no power. So come on, get up and walk, or open those eyes, or whatever else is necessary. Now, when this realization of one power dawned on me, it gave me something to teach. Up to that time, I didn't really know what was healing. I only knew that if I closed my eyes and waited, something stirred in me, and then healings took place. But I had no way of accounting for it until I learned this lesson, that the infinite nature of God makes it impossible for the devil to be anything but a mental image in my own mind. It may not have originated in my mind. It may have originated in what Paul calls the carnal mind. It may have originated in mortal mind, that is, in ignorance. It may have originated in the belief of good and evil. But if I accept devil, Satan, mortal mind, error, evil, then that is an image in my own thought, in my own mind, which I now have to contend with. And I don't have too much chance of winning. The only opportunity I have for success in molding my life or healing work is to abide constantly in the realization that whatever problems are brought to me, and it makes no difference, physical, mental, moral, financial, that I have nothing to do with those problems as such. I have only to do with the fact that they represent the activity of the carnal mind, the mind that has the good and evil, and therefore that this is nothingness, that the one power is the God power, and I don't have to get that anywhere. I don't have to use it. In fact, I can't use it. That would be a strange thing, too, if I could use infinite God or infinite truth. That'd be kind of a horrible thing to contemplate. I'm perfectly willing to let God or truth use me, but I don't like to feel that God is something I can use. That sort of puts ego in the saddle. Now, the truth is, and I can know the truth, I can't use it, but I can know it. The truth is that God is. And when you say God, you're not speaking of a person, but of a power, a principle, a being, a cause, a law. And so, that is what is, but being infinite, there's nothing to oppose it. Therefore, we never have to battle it. We never have to contend with it. Stand ye still. The battle is not yours. Stand ye still and see the salvation of the Lord. That is where you come to the Master's teaching of the Sermon on the Mount. Resist not evil. Just think of that. If that were a wrong statement, the Master wouldn't have given it to us. If that were not a principle of life, the Master wouldn't have left it behind. But he went to great length in the Sermon on the Mount to show the many applications of that principle. Take no thought for your life. Resist not evil. Somebody wants to steal from you, let them. Give them a little extra too. It won't deprive you of anything. Don't slap back. Don't seek revenge. Don't even desire revenge. Stand ye still, and you will soon find that it is a truth that there is but one power. Now, if you go back to the Hebrew teaching, the Old Testament, you will find two powers all through the Old Testament, and you will find the power of God, and you will find the power of evil. You'll find God rewarding in one place, and you'll find God punishing in another place. And all of that was based on an erroneous premise. It was based on the belief that the Hebrews had found God. They hadn't. Only a few had. Moses had. Elijah had. There were a few that had. But the Jews themselves knew nothing about God. And what they were talking about was cosmic consciousness, where as ye sow, so shall ye reap. Whatever it is that you give power to in your mind, that's what you give power to. That has nothing to do with God. That has to do with cosmic consciousness, the law of cause and effect. But the great masters of the Hebrew faith, like Moses, Elijah, Elisha, Isaiah, they knew better, but they couldn't convey it. Solomon knew better. They couldn't convey it. They couldn't impart it. The human mind they had just come out of slavery, out of ignorance, out of darkness so recently that they couldn't accept this light of the one true God. And that is the reason that of old the Hebrews were never allowed to mention the name of the one true God. Only the high priest could do that. And they could only do it when they were in the inner sanctuary. And the reason was that that which was taught as God wasn't God, it was cosmic consciousness. But God itself was only permitted to be known to the priests. It was revealed to them, and they knew it. And why was that? Well, they felt that in their ignorance, if the real name of God was given to the people, that they would misunderstand it and apply it to their own egos and start an I am movement. They were afraid that everybody would run around saying, I am God. And that would be nice, wouldn't it? Be a beautiful thing for all these humans to be walking around believing that they were really God. And you see, that can't be. I am is the true name of God, but you can't start a movement with it, and that's what would have happened. They would have organized it. You can't do that with the true name of God. The true name of God must be taken into your consciousness and held there sacredly and secretly until finally it dawns on you that when you say, I am God, you're not talking about a human being being God. You're talking about the fact that you as a human being have died, and now God is in the ascendancy looking out through your eyes. In other words, you never would be guilty of saying, I am God, if you knew the truth. You would have a listening ear so that you could hear in your ear the voice saying, know ye not, I am God. And then you'd know that you had at last reached the throne. You had at last reached the inner sanctuary. When you say, I am God, you are a liar. That's what they were afraid of in those days, that if these poor, ignorant people, illiterate people, were ever told that the name of God is I am, that they would run around flapping their arms about their sides and singing to themselves, I am God, I am God. It's a horrible thing, but that's what was possible, and that's what's possible today when, in one way or another, somebody writes a book and tells people, I am God. The first thing you know, you hear is rumors like this. Joel is off his beam. Do you know he says he's God? And that's what they say about you. The minute you reveal, if you should ever do so, that I am is God, they'll say that you believe you are God. That isn't true. God is you. Oh, that's quite different. God is the life of your being. God constitutes you. God is the substance of your being. God is your life, your mind, your soul. You know that even your body is the temple of the living God. God is the very substance of your body. Just think of that. And then you won't say, I am God, but you will say, God constitutes my being, therefore all that the Father hath is mine. The place whereon I stand is holy ground. So in this modern day, learn the name of God and take it into your inner being secretly and sacredly. And there let it work in you, and you will find that the promise that Solomon made to his workmen is true. Solomon made a promise that when the workmen on the great temple was completed, that he would give them a secret password, and they could travel all over the world when they had that word, and they could always command a master's wages. And unfortunately, something came up that prevented Solomon from giving them this word, and for generations it wasn't known what this secret password was that Solomon intended giving them, which if they knew would carry them all over the world without purse or script. Well, Jesus gave it to his disciples, and they were able to go without purse and script, and always be in possession of everything needful. And now we know, of course, research has shown us that the words that Solomon wanted to give the workers in his temple was, I am. Now every Hebrew master knew the secret and sacred words, I am. They never voiced them to their people, although Isaiah did put in his manuscript, is there any God beside me? I know not any. I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. If you go through the waters, I will be with you, and so forth and so on. Now, Jesus learned these same words, and he said, I am that I am. I am the way and the truth and the life. He thought that by the time he revealed this to his disciples, that they would be ready for this great impartation, but they weren't. They weren't. They lost it for a long, long time, and only 3 or 4 of them ever regained it. Later, Paul received the light, and he was able to say, I live, yet not I. Christ liveth my life. The I am lives my life. Now, when you come to this realization that God has fulfilled itself or himself as your individual being, that God it is the fulfillment of your being, you can then say, that which I am seeking, I am. All that the Father hath is mine. The place whereon I stand is holy ground. I am the child of God, then heir, joint heir with Christ to all the heavenly riches, for I and the Father are one. You know, this is one, not that. This. I and the Father are one. And it is in this oneness that we find our self-completeness and perfection. Not that I am anything of myself, but my oneness with God makes me all that God is, an heir to all that God has. Now, these secrets have been known in the metaphysical world for a good many years. But how many of the students have opened their eyes, their souls, their consciousness to this truth, and been willing for a little while to give up the demonstrating of things, the demonstrating of persons, the demonstrating of more and better matter, and been willing to seek only the kingdom, the realm, the realization of God, of what God is. Because those who have done that have come into this awareness. Now, there are 2 points that I'm giving you that constitute major points in our infinite way work. And one of these is the knowledge of the nature of God. Once you begin to perceive that the nature of God is fulfillment, the nature of God is spirit, the nature of God is I am, the nature of God is the very life of my own being, the nature of God is infinity, the nature of God is omnipresence, the nature of God is omniscience, the nature of God is omnipotence. By the time you have realized that, you have realized point number 2 in our work, the nature of error as nothingness. The nature of any form of error, sin, disease, death, lack, and limitation, as the arm of flesh or spittle or nothingness. Now, when you perceive these 2 things, you have God as the all-power and only power, and no longer do you use power over truth, over error. No longer do you use power to remove error. Now you live in the conscious realization of truth as an infinity of being and all else as nothingness. And now you have prayer revealed. You know the whole secret of prayer. Because now prayer is a knowing of this truth about God, about your oneness with God, the infinite nature of your individual being, and the nothingness of any of these claims of sense. Can you not see that just as the word devil isn't a being or power, it's just a word in my thought, so the word sin or the word desire or the word lack, these aren't conditions, these are words. And as long as I have them in my thought, I must have them in manifestation. For whatever I have is what I'm going to demonstrate. Now, why should I continue having 2 powers when one of them is not a power in any way, shape, manner, or form, and I'm keeping it alive by my own belief in it? When you ask help of a practitioner, do you know what you're doing? Have you ever stopped to ask yourself what you think or what you believe is taking place in the consciousness of the practitioner? Or are you just blindly believing, well, I've asked for help, I'll get it, without knowing any of the processes or any of what's going on? You really and truly should, when you ask a practitioner for help, know at least what you're asking for, what to expect, and you ought to know a little bit about whether that practitioner knows what you know. You see, when you ask for help, let us say you ask help for heart disease. Now, did you ever stop to realize that your metaphysical practitioner doesn't know anything about a heart, and wouldn't know a healthy heart from a sick heart, and wouldn't know how to turn a sick heart into a well heart, and wouldn't even know what a well heart ought to be like when it is well? And that by saying, heal my heart, you're really being a little naive about this whole thing? Just what do you think your practitioner can do about a sick heart? And the answer is, I never knew a practitioner who could do anything about it, except the few practitioners who've come out of materia medica. We don't know what hearts are, or much of what they're for. And those who have come out of materia medica are trying very hard to forget all about hearts when they're asked for metaphysical help. But I know some of them. Now, as a matter of fact, when you ask for help for a sick heart, what you should expect of your practitioner is this: that your practitioner knows enough to know that you don't live by virtue of a heart. Man does not live by bread alone. Man does not live by breath alone, or by hearts or liver or lungs. Man lives by the grace of God. That's what makes man live. Nothing but the grace of God. And man needs nothing but the grace of God in order to live. Now, I can tell you here a little secret that I've learned. I really shouldn't have learned it because I shouldn't have been bothering about the body, but I couldn't help in 28 years picking up this little bit of information. The heart doesn't govern life. Life governs the heart. It's life that makes the heart beat, not the heartbeat that makes life. Now, it's a strange thing. Brains do not make intelligence. Oh, no. Cows have brains, and calves have brains, and oxen have brains, and a lot of stupid people have brains, and heavy ones. Brains do not make intelligence, but intelligence may operate through the brain. So with all you're getting, don't get brains, get intelligence. Don't be concerned about sick brains or well brains. Be concerned about intelligence. So your practitioner doesn't try to heal a sick brain, a sick heart, liver, or lung. Oh, many people call a practitioner and say, will you give me some help so I can sleep? Why? Why do you want to get unconscious? Wouldn't it be better to stay awake and read the Bible or a good metaphysical book? People are too anxious to sleep and be dead, unconscious. It isn't necessary to sleep. Man doesn't live by sleep. No. Now, the only one thing necessary in our experience is the grace of God. When you have the grace of God, you live even if you haven't got a heart, believe it or not. Many people do not realize how many people there are walking around with half their bodies missing, organs and functions inside their bodies. Something else takes its place. Dr. Cryle over in Cleveland some years ago removed half of a man's brain. But the man went right on functioning intelligently with full use of all his capacities with just half a brain. And who is to say that he couldn't have removed another half? Only a matter of his own faith. So it is with us. The body does not make you live, but your life functions your body. And while you have life, your body will function. But you can have a body and have no life. And you can have a good, perfect body, too, and have no life. But you can't have life and not a body. And so it is. Let us not believe for a minute that there's some mysterious power that heals us because we have the name practitioner or title practitioner. That's a lot of nonsense. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free, and you don't have to have a title to heal with. But you do have to know the truth. And you can have all the titles and all the colleges, and you won't heal if you don't have the truth. And the truth is this: your practitioner can't heal you. Your practitioner can know the truth that God is the life of you, and that life functions your body. And if you've lost an organ or a function, it can rebuild it again. If you destroy this temple, in 3 days, I, that same I which was God, that will raise it up again. And where is I? In the midst of you. I, in the midst of you, am mighty. I, in the midst of you, am the very bread of life to you, and the wine, and the water, and the resurrection. As long as you can say I or think I, you're safe. If you're in the valley of the shadow of death and can say I, your life can never be taken from you. If you are out in the middle of the ocean with nothing about you but storms and can say I, you cannot drown. If you are in a fire and can say I, you will not drown. If you can't say it, think it. If you can't say it or think it, be sure you've said and thought it enough before the fire and the flame happen. And you won't have to say it and think it. You could think it enough tonight to have some eyes laid up in storage for you. Because I is the secret. I in the midst of you is God. God gave himself to you as your life, as your being. And that is why in all mystical language, the word self, S-E-L-F, is spelt with a capital S. It means that God is your self. Not the little fellow or girl you thought was yourself. That's only your concept of yourself, your false or limited image of yourself. Your real selfhood is God, or God is your real selfhood. Ye shall know this truth, and this truth shall make you free. When you know God as your selfhood, when you know God as infinite, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, then you're knowing that regardless of what form of error ever touches your life, you can smile at it and say, thou hast no power. You're a mental image in no place. That's all. A mental image in no place. Nothing, and let it go. Drop it. Don't fight evil. Don't fight error. Don't try to overcome it. And above all, don't believe there's a God that's going to do something to it, for it was nothing in the beginning. You are a liar and the father of lies. Nothing. Nothing. There's nothing to be done to error but know the truth about its nothingness. And in proportion as you know the infinite nature of your God self, you are automatically at that instant knowing the nothingness of this claim. What did hinder you? Pick up your bed and walk. So it is. These are principles. They're in the Bible, but they're not clearly stated, and so it has taken our great metaphysical revelators and writers to put them into clearer language for us, and with each generation they're becoming clearer and clearer, and eventually everyone on the face of the globe will know this truth. I'm happy to speak about that for a minute. There was a time when Christian Science and unity and divine science held within themselves about all of the spiritual truth there was on earth, and some in the New Thought works. And that is about where it ended. The rest of the world didn't seem a bit interested, and it looked for a while as if we in the metaphysical world were going to have an exclusive on, and we alone were going to demonstrate harmony in our experience. But that didn't last too long, fortunately, for now the Protestant churches of the world are becoming interested in the subject of spiritual healing and these spiritual principles, and they are reaching out for our literature. and they are beginning to practice. They are beginning to open themselves to this work, not only in the United States, but in Canada, and also in Europe and in Africa, in Australia. We just came back from Australia and New Zealand and found that all of the Methodist bookshops and Baptist bookshops are carrying the Infinite Way books and doing a very nice business with them, showing the interest in the Orthodox field for this spiritual truth. And you will, within a few years, realize that everyone on the face of the globe is wanting to know the truth that has really lifted the Christian Scientists and the Unity students and the Divine Science students out of the ordinary rut of human living and made them somewhat healthier, a great deal more moral, a great deal more successful than the average run of person, the average run of the world. And the rest of the world is inquiring now why, and why can't we? And they are reaching out for literature on that subject, and we are the fellows who are going to be called on to introduce this to them. But never believe for a moment that we can introduce it to them by saying so, but by being so.